Ladies and gentlemen, now that you already know how to find a job in Russia, which is the most important thing for most people, we need to cover how to master the Russian language, which is the most important thing in Russia. The knowledge of the Russian language is a very important factor if you wish to come to Russia, whether it be for studies, for self-discovery, or to find a job, or even for business. Because it's true, some Russians speak English, but it's quite rare depending on the city you are in. If you're in Moscow, there will be more Russians who speak English. If you're in St. Petersburg, fewer and fewer. But generally, a very small portion of the population speaks English, let alone French. So you cannot rely on these languages if you wish to live here. That's why in this video, we will address the topic of how to learn the Russian language. Not just the Russian language, but also any language quickly as possible. Because the approach here must be very strategic, especially when it comes to the Russian language, which is a very difficult language. We will start by talking about the technique used by the majority of people who try to learn a language. We all know that generally when we want to learn a language, we enroll in a language center. We go to class 3-4 times a week. The teachers give us grammar and conjugation rules, and we go home. We try to remember what we learned in class. And sometimes we even have a book where we do exercises with the goal of passing the language exam to get our diploma or certificate. But that is the approach to pass the language exam, not the approach to understand and speak the language as quickly as possible. So that is why I will explain the modern method of language learning. To be able to speak and understand as quickly as possible, to learn a language from the start, the goal must be to retain as many words as possible. That is the first point. But how do you retain as many words as possible? Many use dictionary, some books, etc. But if you learn words out of context, it will be a bit difficult for you to apply them. However, if you have the possibility to learn a word directly in its context, that is ideal. But in 2035, there is a very important new source, which is podcast. A podcast is in the context of learning a language. It's an audio where people who speak the language in question communicate with the aim of helping the learners improve their language level. The advantage of using a podcast as a source is that you learn new words in the necessary context. You learn new phrases and you listen to natural language as natives usually speak. Whereas with books, the audio is often already prepared for academic purposes. But the question that arises here is how to use a podcast for language learning. Well, I explain in details. It's important to mention here that for every beginner, you must master the alphabet, practice the pronunciation of the different syllables, and be able to read in the language in question. And that you can do with the help of YouTube and Google. It should take you around 2 to 3 days maximum, because that is really the basics, and you must not waste time on that, because remember that the goal is to understand and speak as quickly as possible. The first thing is to find podcasts at level A1, A2, where people speak slowly with easy language. You must have the scripts of the podcast you are going to listen to, and the translation into your language. That is to say, the written form of what is said in the podcast. How do we start? Let's say you take a beginner podcast of about 3 to 4 minutes, and you have the script open on our computer or phone. First, you listen to the podcast while looking at the transcript to be able to understand how each word is pronounced correctly. Second, you must repeat each phrase after the podcaster. Here the goal is to improve your pronunciation. Despite the fact that you do not yet understand what is being said in the podcast, you must read everything that is written with the correct pronunciation and intonation, so that a Russian can understand what you are saying. After having read and knowing how to pronounce the different words, you will move to the third step, which is studying the text. You must try to understand every word that is said, that is written in the text. Here, given that you are a beginner, you will take each phrases in the podcast and try to understand the deep meaning of each word. To do this, you can look at the translations, but the technique here is to directly expand your vocabulary from each word that you learn in the text. For example, If you see the personal pronoun I in the translations, you will ask an artificial intelligence to give you all the other personal pronouns in Russian with explanations. In this way, you will not only have learned the meaning of the pronoun in the text, but also the other personal pronouns that exist in the language. Same if you see a verb conjugated in the present tense in the first or second person, you will ask the artificial intelligence to conjugate this verb for all the persons, first, second, third, in the past, present, future tense, and give you basic explanation so that you can understand what you are doing. And then you can conjugate it yourself in your notebook, and so on and so forth. The goal here is to learn words and phrases, and at the same time learn grammar rules, conjugation rules, etc. Many students go to class, master all the grammar rules, but are not able to formulate sentences. And every time you have some misunderstandings, you can ask the AI to give you a lessons on a well-defined chapter. For example, if I send this text to the AI to break it down for me, it gives me this term that I don't understand. I ask it to give me a whole chapter on it, and there we go. You will learn gradually, and you will continue this process continuously, one podcast at a time. After having studied the podcast and its script, you must listen to it several times so that the different words can stay in your brain. And if you have the possibility, you can discuss what was said in the podcast in Russian with someone after having listened to it. The goal here is to learn words and know in what context they are used. On the other hand, if you learn a word individually, you will use it, but sometimes you will not make yourself understood, given that you will use it in the wrong context. And after 2 months, you will already be able to read correctly.
Оля, привет.
Привет, привет.
Видела сегодня детей, которые окончили школу. И вспомнила свое время.
Видела сегодня детей, которые окончили школу, и вспомнила свое время.
Свое время? Тебе 100 лет?
Свое время? Тебе 100 лет?
Pronounce words with the correct intonations, and you will even be able to sing in Russian.
В лесу родилась елочка.
В лесу она росла.
В лесу родилась елочка. В лесу она росла.
At this level, you could understand what your language teacher says during your class, but not what your teacher will say when you are at the first year university. The difference is that language teacher speaks slowly so you can understand, but at the universities, teacher speaks naturally. And if you are used to listen to a language where the person speaks slowly, well, you might not understand fast language. That's why some students, when they already manage to understand what their language teacher says in class, they think they already know the language until their first class at university. If you notice here, the explanations are oriented for learning a language without a language teacher. It will be more difficult given that there will be misunderstandings and no one to explain it to you. But with research on AI and YouTube, it could work. But if you have a teacher, then it's easier because If you have misunderstandings, you can ask the teacher. And if you have not yet covered this chapter at school, you could ask the teacher to give you the name of the chapter related to that problem. That way you will go do your research on it with the help of YouTube and artificial intelligence. When you will understand in depth 80% of what is said in the different A1, A2 podcast that I will share with you in the last episode of this series, which will be released on Monday at 8 p.m. St. Petersburg time. And when I say understand, I mean understand all the different grammar rules. Why this ending and not that one? You will have finally passed the first stage of learning. At this level, you can already pass the end of year Russian exam in universities in Russia. You will be able to hold a very basic conversation in Russian language. And more important than that, you will be able to find a job on your own in Russia. Many will ask me, but how long will it take to reach this level? Well, if you apply yourself fully, between 3 to 4 months, you will be able to reach this level. When you are able to understand and read the script of the podcast I mentioned at level A1, A2 without great difficulty, then you will move to level B1, B2, and from time to time C1. At this level, you already know almost all the grammar rules, conjugations rules, etc. You must therefore listen to a slightly more formal language. That is to say, with complex sentences, proverbs, and a more or less natural way of speaking. You must follow the same process. That is to say, listen, read, and repeat after the podcaster, if possible.
Оля, привет.
Привет, Макс.
Оля, привет. Привет, Макс.
И хочу сегодня с тобой поговорить, так как у тебя есть интересный опыт. Во-первых, ты, насколько я знаю, преподаватель русского языка для иностранцев, да?
Да, верно.
Хочу сегодня с тобой поговорить, так как у тебя есть интересный опыт. Во-первых, ты, насколько я знаю, преподаватель русского языка для иностранцев, да? Да, верно?
Here the content will be longer, and consequently, you will learn more, and it will take you more time. But it's important to note here that after each podcast, you must listen to it again and again, the next day several times. And you can do it every morning by putting on your headphones just before going to the campus, or even when you are at work, if your work allows to use earphones. And in this way, you can learn anywhere you go. When you are able to understand, without much difficulty, B1, B2 podcast, here you will move to level C1.
В этом выпуске подкаста я думаю, что мы хотели немножко обсудить ситуацию в городах насчет цен и прочее. И по данным аналитического отдела британского журнала The Economist, российские мегаполисы Москва и Санкт-Петербург переместились на 88 и 70 позиции, соответственно, в рейтинге самых дорогих городов мира. Столица России заняла 37 место, а Санкт-Петербург 73. Сегодня мы поговорим о том, каково это жить в Москве.
Да, каково это жить в Москве, в Петербурге и в Лондоне. Лондон, наверное, намного выше в рейтинге, чем Москва, но мы поделимся своими наблюдениями и сравним, где же все-таки жить дешевле и как изменилась жизнь в наших городах за последний год.
Here is for the elite level. The language here is more or less equal to that of natives. At this level, repetition is no longer important because during the learning process you will have already mastered pronunciation, etc. Here you will just learn new words, new phrases, etc. At this level, you will have reached the elite. You will be able to communicate fluently with little difficulty. It's important to mention here that you can also use books, YouTube video, etc. But I recommend podcasts as the primary source. This technique was applied by one of my students, Justin, from Togo, when I gave Russian lessons to my students. He arrived in Russia in January, and in June, after 6 months, he was already able to give a full presentation in Russian.
Уважаемые преподаватели, дорогие друзья, здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте.
Меня зовут Джастин Амиру. Я приехал из Того. Сейчас я вам расскажу о моей учебе.
This technique is used by many polyglots around the world, and I advise you to do the same. If you notice, I did not mention the university because you must use your language teacher as a mentor when you go to the university. If you only rely on the university, you will not go very far. As you can see, here you know how to learn the Russian language, you have to find a job during your studies, and even how to find a job after your studies. Well, my brothers, these are the pieces of information I did not have when I arrived. I had to learn in the hardest way so that you might not suffer. I had to work in the cold so that you might not have to work in the cold. I had to sacrifice myself for you. Well, brothers and sisters, here is the Russian Revolution, but you do not yet know what it takes to be part of the Russian Revolution by the professor. Well, during episode 4 of the Russian Revolution, which will be the last episode of this event, and which will be released on Monday at 8 p.m. St. Petersburg time, I will explain in detail the plan of action, the plan to follow if you wish to be part of the Russian Revolution. Because this is an opportunity not to be missed. Because Russia is the only country where you don't need to think to find a job. You have the opportunity to study for free at the top universities, as I did with Leroy and Clara, who are studying on a scholarship at the top university in the city of Omsk. Same with Brownlee, who obtained the scholarships right after his arrival in St. Petersburg. Here it is the only country where you have the possibility to choose the field of studies of your choice at the university of your choice. The only country that has survived more than 20,000 sanctions. Currently, thousands of students from all corners of the world are seizing this opportunity. If you are a parent, here is the destination for your son or your daughter. The chance to receive a quality education at top universities. If you are a student in Africa, instead of spending millions for average universities in Africa, you have the opportunity to study at quality universities with all the necessary materials for a good education. This is the Russian Revolution. So do not miss the live session on Monday at 8 p.m. St. Petersburg time. I will explain in details the plan of action to follow, exactly what to do if you wish to be part of the Russian Revolution. And with that, see you on Monday.